challenging to do that, all right? And then you listen to the vows that are given. A marriage is a covenant between two people that is made before God, and he actually joins them together. And there's always witness to these vows, and these vows is where you promise before God and to each other that you're going to be faithful to that person till life or till death. Now, there's little things associated with that, but that's the base premise. I promise to take you as my spouse, and I'll be faithful to you till my death. Faithful means from all others, and faithful to you, and love you. All right? So today, some of those are not even spoken in marriage ceremonies. You don't hear the language, I promise to be faithful to you in sickness and health and all those things, and richer and poor, or I promise to forsake all others. Those are eliminated. You know, when you eliminate that, what does that open the door to? Well, I get tired of you, or things get tough, I'm gone. And that's what happens. I never promised to be faithful till death. And it leaves the door to open marriage too, you know, where you have multiple partners. And that's not the norm today, but it happens, okay? So you look at culture, and marriage has not been raised over time. It gets dummied down. And we'll have some charts to show that. And so here I think what I understand is that Song of Solomon is raising marriage to where it ought to be in God's eyes. All right? And second of all, it's giving you and I permission to enjoy marriage as a relationship, both emotionally and physically or sexually. It's giving you permission. What am I saying permission? Because sometimes there's a antiquated, unbiblical view towards biblical sexuality, that it's repressed and it's something immoral about it. All right? You're not supposed to enjoy it. But God meant it to be enjoyed. It's one of the blessings of being one flesh. So that's why I say permission. To enjoy life with the woman of your youth, as Ecclesiastes said. Yes?
I think there's historical evidence for each culture.
Yes.
And we're reading Corinthians, and we've got people, even in the Jewish faith, within the Bible, who leave that, who take a marriage and don't take it seriously.
Right.
And Abraham, he went outside the marriage to have children.
That's right. Every generation needs this message we're talking about.
We have a culture, we have a group.
Yeah.
Within here, we can say to our children and
Yeah.
each other, this is our culture. It doesn't matter what the world is doing, but this is our culture.
That's right.
How do we keep our marriages faithful?
That's right.
The way God wanted.
And one thing, way is creating the right understanding of sex and marriage, okay? Now, largely today's culture, and I'm stereotyping, so forgive me if this doesn't apply to you or someone you know, but generally this is the way it is, that people find attraction based on sexuality. They get excited. That's encouraged. Find someone that excites you and, you know, arouses your passions, and then you get married. If that's a person that gets you excited and you feel like you just have to be with them, there's the hearts of Twitter and all that. Where typically sexuality is a blessing of marriage. It's not something that leads to marriage. It is a blessing of marriage. You see the difference? So then what causes you to be married? If it's not just because I'm attracted to you sexually, it's going to have to be something higher, right? It's about companionship. And that's why in the Old Testament it talks about our covenant of companion. You know, someone you promise to be a companion with till death departed you. It transcends just mere sex. But sex is a blessing of that companionship. And so we don't want to swing too far the other way. But see the difference, what I'm trying to describe? And so that's what he's doing here. Now, once you give yourselves and agree to be married, is it natural for these desires to arise? Well, of course, because God gave them to us. He's the one that built us biologically and emotionally and spiritually to have these desires, and it's okay. But we have to keep it in the right context, okay? So, did I see another hand?
I was looking at another spiritual application of the betrothal period when he's going to prepare a place, just like Christ went to prepare
Yes.
a place for us, and he's coming back to take us.
He's coming back for us, right.
The excitement in that period of time until he comes back, the anticipation.
Right.
And the focus that we have on culminating our salvation for that.
No, and there's a direct application. If you didn't hear that, we see the same thing. Yes.
Well, it's just not, it's just the keeping of words and promises, and that's a whole other study.
Right.
Our culture today is, yeah, you promise you can, but, that's okay if you don't keep.
Right.
Keeping of one's word, unless it's written down in some formal contract that you can sue somebody over, then.
And even that can be broken. And one of the things, I don't know if you heard him, that one of the things God hates throughout the scripture is a covenant breaker. He just can't, he really, anyone that will make a promise to him or to others and break it, because then everything else falls apart in life. And the covenant of marriage is one of the things that he had a huge problem with when people were forsaking that covenant. All right? So, we see now in the first 5 verses of chapter 3, she's anticipating this coming marriage. She's waiting for him to come. So she's dreaming, because what does it say? On my bed, night after night, I sought him. So she's dreaming or thinking of this day. Now, would that be natural for a bride to do that? You know, maybe fearful, but excited. Whom my soul loves. I sought him, but I did not find him. In other words, she knew it wasn't time. She's looking for him every day, but he isn't coming to get her yet. I must arise now and go about the city. Now, is she literally going out about in the city looking for him? No, it's just her imagining and dreaming. And that's why my publisher in the New American Standard said the bride's troubled dream. But actually, where seek him whom my soul loves. I sought him, but not find him. Now, don't think of her being promiscuous like a woman of the night. That's not what's talking about here. She's just looking earnestly for that day that her husband-to-be was going to come find her. The watchman who made the rounds in the city found me, and I said, have you seen him whom my soul loves? The watchman, many suggest, how is it put? It's watching over her purity and making sure that she doesn't lose her virginity. Now, because in their day, there was tests for virginity. And if you married someone and then you found out her not to be a virgin, you could divorce her because you were lied to, and the dowry is sent back and everything. And so while the sexual act is a private matter, the giving of a man and a woman together was a public matter in their day. And I'm going to express that a little more later, okay? So, verse 4, scarcely I left them when I found him whom my soul loves. I held on to him and would not let go until I brought him into my mother's house, into the room of her who conceived me. I adjure you, O daughters of Jerusalem, by the gazelles or by the hinds of the field, that you would not arouse my or awaken my love until she pleases. That's the phrase I was looking for. So here is her looking for this moment where he would come and they'd be able to be together, all right? And so we went through there. Isn't this a beautiful phrase? I found him whom my soul loves. I mean, isn't that what you look for? Is find someone that your soul, it's an intimate connection, one flesh, that you love each other. Now, that's what she describes there. And so now we're going to look at the actual wedding. We're going from, again, this attraction phase to the attachment, where they're actually going to become. And so she's first going to picture, and actually it names Solomon here, coming, and it's the idea of coming in a procession. And he's going to come with all his best friends. Well, here it'd be his soldiers or his people that he relies on. So that's what we're going to see in verse 6, and it goes all the way through chapter 5 and, chapter 4. And, well, actually, we're going to go all the way chapter 5, verse 1 if we get there, okay? So verse 6, what is coming up from the wilderness like columns of smoke, perfumed with myrrh and frankincense, with all scented powders of the merchant? Behold, it is The traveling coach of Solomon. Now, what would that be? The couch or coach? You know, maybe, you've seen picture old movies that someone's carried on shoulders of someone else, but it's a big, it's a carriage carried by people, right? And they're sitting on their fluffy chair and all that. Well, whatever this is, it's a procession where he's coming to get his wife, all right? 60 men around it, all the mighty men of Israel. Verse 8, all of them are wielders of the sword, expert in war. Each man has sword at his side, guarding against the terrors of the night. King Solomon has made for himself a sedan chair from the timber of Lebanon. He made its posts of silver, its backs of gold, its seats of purple, that's royalty, its interior lovingly fitted out by the daughters of Jerusalem. And so what a magnificent thing. And it speaks to one thing, and I just want to impress upon you. If marriage is serious, you're going to approach it with all the seriousness you can muster. If marriage is a highlight of your life, it's someone you're going to live with for 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years. And second to, I don't know what the top ones are, being born, but you had nothing to do with that. That's probably the biggest day in your life. But then becoming born again, that's the greatest day in your life, right? I'm talking about becoming a Christian. But getting married, isn't it the top three right there? Because now you're losing yourself into one flesh with someone else. And you're bearing new children into the world. It has to be way up in our mind's eyes. And God so intended it to be that way from the beginning, because marriage, where procreation takes place, and families, it's the fabric of society. That's why he always has had it. And that's why there's so many rules and laws about preserving the family. And we, up until recently, it's changing slowly, our government have written laws to promote family. What would be an example of that? Tax breaks for those that are married. You get a better tax break if you're filed jointly or separately. How about if you have children? Yeah, you get every kid as a write-off. What does that encourage? Get married and have multiple kids, all right? Now, the downside is you got to pay for all of them, so it just pay off the tax break versus... but those are laws that are in favor of or promoting marriage, right? And it is the fabric of society. Now, I don't want to get off topic. Thank you. I need help sometimes, don't I? And because I've mentioned this before, but a lot of the problems like in school is teachers often managing kids rather than teaching. Now, why are they managing kids? Because they're not being managed at home. They're not being taught things about discipline and respect and work ethic. And I'm not saying everywhere, but it's a big problem. And that's because those parents weren't taught themselves, because they come from broken families, being raised by a stepfather or a step-parent or a single parent altogether, or they're a turnkey kid where they come home, a latchkey, and they come home and live by themselves. They raise themselves. That's largely our generation. That happens probably 50% of the time, wouldn't you say? All right? At least. More than that. I'm trying to be generous. And that creates problems when those people get married. And so it's as marriage and family disintegrates or goes down, then society follows it. You see that? So on the other hand, if it is supposed to be this great thing and it's so important, we should treat it with all the respect that it's due. That's why people dress up for marriage, isn't it? Now, not all cultures to the same extent, but largely most cultures, they do their best. And that's why even people that you never see wear a suit, when they have a wedding, they'll come in a suit. Now, that's changed. I've seen it in just the last 30, 40 years I've been on this earth, that it used to be everyone dressed up to go to a wedding to honor the bride and the groom and the institution of marriage. But now I see people come in shorts and sandals. What? That's cool? Huh?
That's cool for us to pray like that.
I didn't hear you.
I'm oxymoron. That's
Oh, that's craziness. Okay. And you say, well, what's wrong with that? If you want to get married on the beach and wear shorts and sandals, long as you don't diminish the value and importance of the marriage, all right? You could do it anyway, long as you keep it esteemed as high. This is very important, all right? And it's hard to sometimes when you're doing it skydiving, right? It's hard to, okay? Or a drive-through what? The drive-through place in Vegas. Yes, right. Okay. Who was the one that eloped? Wasn't it Anel's parents?
Yeah, they eloped.
Now, could you elope and still take marriage serious? Yes. So I'm not saying it has to be one way, but it makes it challenging when, do you know what I'm saying? Just do whatever you can to make it serious. Yes. You did too. That's right. You didn't tell your parents. I forgot that. Until afterwards. But you took it seriously, didn't you? Yeah. That's why. How long you were married? 53. All right. So it's Solomon coming. All right. And we see that they're coming, and it's this great procession. It's beautiful. It's exquisite. And it's becoming of the event that is happening. All right? So verse 12. Go forth, O daughters of Zion. Gaze on King Solomon, the crown which his mother has crowned him on the day of his wedding, on the day of his gladness of his heart. Crowns were usually wreaths of flowers rather than royal crowns. But they were frequently worn by the couple in their wedding festivities, one writer writes. Okay? And so now we're going to look at the wedding feast or the life itself. Now, this language is going to be, sorry, Sally, this is going to be the one that's going to find you more uncomfortable. Huh? I said Sally because I was trying to, I forgot again. Yeah. What'd you say?
Going back to a $10,000 wedding dress never made two people married.
Thank you. Exactly.
I've seen a lot of really fancy weddings. It didn't hold them together. There has to be a covenant.
That's the other side to it. I'm glad you bring that out because sometimes people spend zillions of dollars. Did you know zillion's not a word, a number? I had to look it up the other day. It's just Zillions is not a number. But that's right, because it's almost, yes, and it doesn't make a marriage, does it? Or does it mean you're being serious about your marriage? Okay. So I appreciate you sharing that. Here, when they would get married, there would be the wedding feast. And where I said the sexual union is a private matter, but taking of someone as a spouse is a public matter in their day, this is what would happen. And there would be the wedding feast, and there would be a tent or a place, but then the husband, the wife, they would go in there. Now, the Catholic idea is consummate a marriage. We're not going to use that word, consummating a marriage by the sex act, because that's not a biblical thing, because what consummates a marriage is when you take your vows and you say, I do, before God. That's when he joins you together. That's when you're married. The sexual union is a privilege or a blessing of it. But when you take someone, that's the biblical language of the sexual union. It says also Joseph, remember he found her to be pregnant, but he had never known his wife. Known. What is that? It's the idea he's never had the sexual relationship with her. She was still a virgin, all right? And that's why when he found her pregnant, since he's never knew her, he knew she'd been unfaithful, right? So that's when they would go in and then come out, because now she's lost her virginity. They are one, and now it's permanent. She cannot be married to anyone else because she's no longer a virgin, and now it's forever because they took it so very seriously. This was only a blessing for those who were husband and wife. And it didn't bind you together more, but it was a sacred blessing of marriage. And once you enjoyed that, there's no going back ever, right? And while they're not watching it, they're all aware of it. You understand? They would know they're going off to do this now. Then he had the opportunity to come back and say, hey, she's not a virgin, right? And so there was a lot of things writing on this, but it's all about a public attitude and perception. Now, remember we talked about last week, you go to Africa and people will nurse right in front of you. They're not ashamed of just a bodily function of feeding a child because it's a beautiful thing. Now, should it be done with the discretion? Yes. In the same breath, they're not ashamed of what God has made us to do with one another, enjoy each other sexually, while it's not going to be done in a lewd, base way. It wasn't hidden either. You understand? They were aware of it even though they're not watching it, but they're aware of what's happening. And so the other side of that spectrum is the Victorian era, where you couldn't even mention the word pregnant, because if someone's pregnant, that suggested they had to have sex to get pregnant, so you don't mention the word pregnant because that's embarrassing publicly. Well, I understand that, okay? But is pregnancy something to rejoice in or be ashamed of? Well, so see how it can swing too far the other way? All right? Now, when you talk about someone, we're expecting, we're going to have a child, she's pregnant. Do you go in and say, well, here's how it happened? No, I don't want to hear it how it happened. I understand how it happened. That's holy and sacred between you and your wife. But I rejoice with you, you're pregnant. But I don't want to hear that, right? Now, our society swings the other way, that what? You talk about all of it, right? Especially when people get together before they're married. How was it? Well, let me tell you, all right? And that's taking something that is holy and pure and making it something base and lewd and common. That's the word I want you to, common. It's supposed to be holy. Common is what everyone does, right? Holy is what God's given you to do, right? It's special. But not to be ashamed of. That's the key. So the key is, how do you talk about it and keep it a holy thing, but yet not so holy that we're afraid of it, we're ashamed of it. You know what I'm saying? Because it's finding the right balance. Well, Song of Solomon does it because the language is highly figurative, but very honorable to the sexual relationship in marriage. So here we go. How beautiful you are, my darling. How beautiful you are. Now, some writers said beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. Is that true? Because he's going to describe her like she's the model knockout of the world. Well, to a guy that's in love, is she? Well, yes. And should it be that way? Yes. And is there beauty in the eye of the beholder? Is that not true? Yes. People have all different things. Your eyes are like doves behind your veil. We already talked about doves, right? Before their eyes. Your hair is like a flock of goats that descended from the Mount Gilead. And you're like, what? And your hair is like a flock of goats. Am I going to make any points with her? All right. So that's what I'm saying. It's highly figurative, but their wealth was in livestock and clothing and food. Not so much in silver and gold, but in those things, right? If you had big stores of food, you had a lot of livestock and clothing, you're wealthy. And so they could see coming off the hill the goats, and they were usually all black, streaming down. Wasn't that a beautiful thing, seeing the goats come down? Just a herd of them, just like falling down from the mountain. He says, your hair must have been black. It was beautiful. Behind the veil, you could just see it streaming down. So in their day, would that be quite a compliment? All right? Your teeth are like a flock of newly shorn ewes. Now we're talking about lambs. And so they would be white, and it said that have come up from their washing. So sometimes when you shear a lamb, they look pretty dirty, but after you wash them, what do they look like? So she had nice white teeth that he could see Now, do we put a value on white teeth? That's why you get whiteners and strips and you do all those bleaching, because there's a value. She had beautiful teeth, and he notices those things. Now, is that typical of two people who love? Do they notice everything about one another? Yeah, they do, right? And that's normal. It's okay. Not one of them has lost her young. What does that mean? Yes, she has all of them. She's not in a big hole in her, like one's been knocked out. They're all there. Would that make it more beautiful? Okay. And we value that. That's why we have implants. Okay. Your lips are like a scarlet thread. Your mouth is lovely. Temples are like a slice of pomegranate behind your veil. All right, like, what? Pomegranate? Now, some translate temples to cheeks, so what would it be talking about? Yeah, do we value, women put a lot of makeup on their cheeks to highlight their cheekbones because that's attractive, and we like rosy cheeks, and that's what he's saying. The lips like scarlet thread, so I guess they were thin, but now they like thick lips, or, it always changed, but he's describing her, right? Yes.
Pomegranates were very important because when Solomon built the temple, he had
Yes.
pomegranates everywhere.
Yeah. So he's taking things that are beautiful, like scarlet thread would be, again, of royalty or riches, right? So it's not just, right? So your neck is, now this one's funny, and your neck is like a tower in David's temple, Oh, thank you. Okay. Well, it built with rows stones on which hung 1,000 shields around, all the round shields of the mighty men. So would you understand the background? It was customary for soldiers to hang their shields on the towers belonging to the person they served to show that they pledged allegiance to him. So they'd come in and there'd be this tower and they'd hang their place. And so you'd see it, and the shields would all be shiny perhaps, but it's just covered with all it. And so here she has this longer neck perhaps where she can hang all this jewelry and gold, but he just sees it as beautiful. He's noticing everything about her, okay? Would you speak to your wife that way, using those kind of terminology? No, because it's not culturally relevant. We would speak other ways, but it's just raising, just speaking of her beauty and admiring her. Now, what woman doesn't like to be admired? Because when we get to Ephesians chapter 5, and we do our marriage class again, and when we do something about biblical sexuality, Paul summarizes the husband-wife relationship to two things. Wives, respect your husbands. That's what they thrive off of. And husbands, love your wives. That's the air that they breathe. And a woman knows when she's loved, and she knows when she's unloved. And here, he's letting her know that I love you, every part of you, right? So how about if it went down like this? You're all right. I like your mom, I like your dad, You're about the right size, but man, I can't stand your face. Would that go off well? No. And so you say, well, they probably never get married if that's the case. No, I understand, but it's appropriate. And men say, well, that's not me. Well, let it become us, right? And teach our children to admire and speak well of one another rather than, okay? And we can model it for them. I wish we had some of the younger parents in here. Model it for them. It's okay in front of them. Then he goes on. Your two breasts are like two fawns, twins of a gazelle, which feed among the lilies. Again, it's just a natural body part which everyone notices. Women are aware of them, and so they dress to emphasize them or de-emphasize, and men notice them, right? And it's not necessarily sexual. It's like seeing your eyes, your ears, your nose, your breasts, right? He sees them and he knows them. And it's not sexual. It is sexual, but it's not crude. See what I'm saying? He's aware. Until the cool of day, when the shadows flee away, I will go to the mountains of myrrh and to the hill of frankincense. What do you think mountains and hill refer to figuratively here? With the same thing, the woman's breasts, okay? And so he's going to enjoy her as God designed it to be. Now, let's just stop and look at 1 Corinthians 7. The Catholics have a teaching that has somewhat, it's not so much anymore, but it used to have filtered down into culture at large because they had such a presence around the world that sex is only for procreation. That's why they have a ban against any type of birth control, right? Because you're not supposed to have sex for pleasure. It's only for procreation. So it's a sin to practice any type of birth control because you're thwarting God's intention for sexual relations, right? That's why they have it. So you cannot use any type of contraceptive anyway or practice it anyway. But Paul says it totally different. Chapter 7, when we study this in marriage, verse 3. Let the husband fulfill his duty to his wife, and likewise also the wife to her husband. So what duty? Well, let's read on. The wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does. And it goes the other way. The husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does. Now, what is he talking about? He's just got done saying in verse 2, because of immorality, get married. Get him married. And then the next thing he says is stop what? Depriving each other of what? Sexual relations. That's what he's talking about. Now here's the exception. Verse 5. Stop depriving one another, except by agreement for a time that you devote yourself to a prayer. So it has to be voluntarily. It has to be by agreement, consent. And it has for a specific period of time. And it has to be for the purpose of prayer. And then come back together lest Satan tempt you because of the lack of self-control. So what's he saying? Don't refrain from having this blessing that God has given to you. And don't withhold it from each other. It's wrong because God understands you both are supposed to enjoy it. And it's not just for having kids, right? Or else you would refrain. You wouldn't have sex ever again in your life if you knew you were done having children, right? Because the Catholics say that'd be sin if you practice any kind of contraception or any type of birth control. So this is what's happening. They're married and they're enjoying each other. And they're speaking about it in a holy way, but that's not common. It's sexual, but it's not crude. And if I just get us to see that, it's okay. The challenge is to keep it pure and holy and not crude. All right, we're out of time almost, but a couple more because I don't want to come back to this chapter. You are altogether beautiful. Isn't that beautiful? Oh, we sing a song about Jesus that way, but it's the man talking about the woman. My darling, there's no blemish in you. Come with me, Lebanon, my bride. May you come with me from Lebanon. Journey down from the summit of Amana, the summit of Sinai, and the Mount Hermon. That's up in the northern Galilee. They actually have snow on it. From the summit, from the den of lions, from the mountains of lepers. He's like saying, I know maybe there's anxiousness or nervousness or there are worries. Let's just run away to the mountains and just enjoy each other. Away from all these fears and concerns. Is that healthy? Like Dave's pointed out, the married men, they had a year off from military service. They were supposed to spend time with their wife for a whole year to make this marriage and this family strong. So, you have made my heart beat faster, my sister. Sister was an affectionate term for wife. With a single glance of your eyes, with a single strand of your necklace, is it okay for a woman to be aware of her sexuality and use it in a marriage? Yes. She knows that. It's just a glance of your eyes. How beautiful is your love, my sister, my bride. How much better is your love than wine, the fragrance of your oils, and all kinds of spices. The oils would be the perfumes that she's wearing. Your lips, my bride, drip honey. Honey and milk are under your tongue, and the fragrance of your garments like the fragrance of Lebanon. A garden locked is my sister, my bride. A rock garden locked. What would that be speaking of prior to marriage? So, self-control or chastity. She kept herself a virgin because she valued it. All right? But now your shoots are an orchard of pomegranates with choice fruits, hinted with nard plants. In other words, Everything's just blossoming. So you get the picture, right? It's very delicately expressed, but it's speaking about what they're enjoying together, all right? And then I think I'll come back to this later because I want to see the difference today. You are a garden spring, a well of fresh water, streams flowing from Lebanon. Awake, O north wind. Come with the wind of the south. Make my garden breathe in fragrance. Make my beloved come to this garden and eat its choice fruits. Let's enjoy this. God intended to be that way. And so here's where we'll stop, because remember I said sexual union is a private matter, but taking a spouse is a public. Here's some tough language. Chapter 5, verse 1. I've come into the garden, my sister. We would think that's them enjoying the pleasures of marriage together. I've gathered my mirth along my bosom. I've eaten my honeycomb and my honey. I've drunk my wine and my milk. Eat, friends, drink and imbibe deeply, O lovers. Is that inviting others? It's inviting others to be aware of what's happened. We are married. They know it. They're enjoying it. Remember I said they would go into the tent and then they'd come out? They're aware of it. And it's done in a different culture, in a different way, but it was never ashamed of. It was done with, propriety, but it was beautiful. And everyone understand it's what you want for your children. Okay? Thanks for being here. We're done with chapter 5. We'll look at married life next.